We've got a few questions. All these satellites in low Earth orbit, there are a couple of things that sound a bit scary in sense of their reliability. One of them is whatever this beast is called space weather. How do we forecast that? Many of us went to a lecture last night on forecasting weather and the history of it. What is space weather? Will it have an impact on anything to do with low Earth orbit? And if so, how do we forecast it?
I think that, space weather is the effects that occur in space that are caused by nature that isn't debris. So you have cosmic radiation and things like that we've talked about before. They're generated by sunspots sometimes and changes from the sun that finally come here and can turn your communications sour really quickly, and can also affect the not just your communications but your navigation as well, making some of your satellites decay out of their orbits and the like. So I think it's just having an understanding of what the natural environment is doing on your assets that are in space, and to understand that there are a myriad of effects collectively known as space weather that will affect your satellites, not just in low Earth orbit, but all the way out.
That's one of the areas that Australia is world leading. We have a area of the Bureau of Met that specializes in space weather, and they're providing alerts and information to the rest of the world. They fit into, I guess there's about 4 major space weather centers. One of them's here in Sydney.
They recently announced $150 million that the Australian government is committing towards the NASA mission or missions to the moon and Mars. How will the narrative go in Australia to Australian business in terms of capturing some of the commercial opportunity from that?
So the way the Australian Space Agency is structuring most of these programs is that they will agree with NASA in this particular case the areas or the capabilities that they think Australia can participate in on some of these missions. And then eventually that they will go out to effectively a public tender. Here is a mission, here is a NASA mission, here is what we think Australia can contribute, and who is able, put your best foot forward, what do you think you can do? And they'll down select from that, and that's the way people will get involved in that. One of the things the agency is really looking to do is get Australian industry embedded in space supply chains around the world. So when Megan talked this morning about all of the various different agreements that they're signing with the various different space agencies, that is the model that they're going to use. They're going to select joint projects where Australia has an ability to build something and participate in that, and then go to industry to get people to participate.
Question to Bill, and I think it also applies to the other two. You can choose to answer or not. If you were starting a space startup today, or founding a space startup today, what would you do? What markets have the biggest revenue opportunities? What's your offering, or what would be the best offering? And who would be the customers? That
is a question that is as big as space itself. So
I'll give you, I'll give you an example. There's a startup company in Australia called Fluorosat. I've got nothing to do with them whatsoever. They're doing exactly what I was talking about. They're taking space data, they're writing algorithms, they've come up with some unique ways of handling the big data problem. The farmers absolutely love them. They're going to make an absolute fortune.
And I think on that, Jason really gave some great examples. I mean, some of those are some really amazing, I would call it left field thinking. Particularly one of the ones that I'm very familiar with and I think is wonderful is Silentium Defense, where they're using literally the RF signals that are already being generated on our planet, the TV stations, the FM radio stations. They're actually able to build a sensor small enough to actually catch those reflections off the satellites that are up there and to actually derive a space situational awareness solution from that. So that's the type of thinking that Australia brings to this game. And until the commercial side of things started in a big way, people didn't really think along those lines. Now people are saying, hey, there are still issues we need to solve in space. Australians are just as capable as anybody with coming up with those ideas. And if they do it the right way, I mean, many of them are going to fall by the wayside, but if they do it the right way, yes, there's a dollar to be made out of that.
Okay. Jason, a question for you, which is you have to be, as the defence component of this space industry, be particularly careful of some of the threats that were talked about this morning: cybersecurity, GPS jamming, all of the things that could suddenly stop the satellites on which you rely working. So what are the measures being taken that you can talk about that will super protect the defence satellites?
I think the effects that are occurring on Earth from interference with satellites is just as important for us. So we need to, and we are looking at ways that we can harden ourselves and understand our vulnerabilities in communications, in positioning, navigation, timing and the like, such that our air, naval and land forces can still fight through if there's something going on in space. Certainly, one of the first things we need to do is understand through space situational awareness to be able to characterise what is going on in space, so that we can understand what is about to occur, if it is about to occur, and then try and avoid it. That's the first thing that we would like to do, because once an effect, if it's not a reversible effect, is made, you've lost that satellite. So we need to talk about things like responsive space and what's known as space control. So do we start to move into having space domain awareness and then being able to take defensive actions for our satellites? Yes, we're thinking about that, and I'll take any good idea because I'm open to them all.
What I'm talking about with this mesh network of small satellites, that in fact is the antidote to some of the defence problems of cyber in space and whatnot, because first of all, if you've got hundreds of thousands that are up there, it's pretty hard to take them all out. Number two, they're small and cheap, so you can replenish them. And number three, and even more importantly, is as technology evolves very quickly, you can replace them with much better technology very fast. So in fact, what I'm talking about is one of the solutions for defence.
Yeah, I agree with Paul. That's just what I was going to say. There's different ways of creating resilience. One of them is to have multiple things, which it makes it hard to take them all out at the same time. And that's what we're seeing with some of these constellations.
Okay. And oh, by the way, the Pentagon just started last year a whole new agency, if you will, sub-agency in the Pentagon to do exactly that.
Does the enormous increase in small satellites in low orbit potentially, or could that constellation potentially reflect sunlight and cause global cooling? And the second question, will the space debris eventually collect into a ring around Earth like Saturn?
So in terms of the reflection of sunlight causing global cooling, there would have to be an awful lot more than even the ones that are being planned in order to do that. There's an awful lot of sunlight coming down that those are not going to block. In terms of a ring like Saturn, yes, not quite as extensive as that, but you could have that effect with a lot of debris. It's not going to get to those dimensions, though.
Within 8 years, I think, it's a projection that we'll have satellites in orbit capturing the sun and focusing that energy back on Earth. So I'm turning your question around right now.
That's good. And Jason?
I'll leave it to the scientists.
Okay, that's a perfect answer, and thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panel.